A little more grit,
a little more
determination, maybe play a little better. We welcome in Brian Westbrook. Brian, what do you make of what Bruce Arians had to say? Try harder. Be less 43.
I had no problem with what Bruce Arians said. I think he was absolutely right. But I'll tell you this. I played for Andy Reid, and Andy Reid, even after bad games, he would come to you in film, and he would say, you need to do all these things better. He would talk to you in front of the team. He would say, okay, guys, here's some things that you personally need to do better. But when he got in front of the media, he never would throw his players underneath the bus. He would never say, Brian Westbrook had a bad game, Donovan McNabb had a bad game. He would always say, as a coach, I need to put these guys in a better position. And that always drove the media crazy. But now you have Bruce Arians, who is a different guy. It's a lot of different ways to coach your players. And if you listen to that interview, that whole interview, Tom Brady wasn't the only guy that Bruce Arians threw underneath the bus. He threw a lot of different guys underneath the bus. And really, the reporters, they began asking them specifically about, well, how did this guy play and how did this guy play? And Bruce Arians said, well, this guy did good. This guy needs to do better. So he had no problem. I think he was fair. He talked about everybody in the same exact way. I had to believe when Tom Brady went down to Tampa, he desperately wanted to be out of New England. And Bruce Arians said, listen, I'm going to keep it real with everybody. I'm going to coach you just like everybody else. I'm going to hold you accountable. And I have to believe Tom Brady would expect something like this after the game that he played on Sunday. And Brandon, to me, this is exactly what you want. You want integrity from your coach. If you were one of those players on that football team and saw how Tom Brady played, and if Bruce Arians got in front of the cameras and said, hey, we have nothing to worry about, all these guys did bad, and Tom needs to improve, there's no integrity there. The players on that football team want to make sure that everyone is held accountable, and I think it starts with Tom Brady, and Bruce Arians did a great job of that in his interview.
Brandon.
I like Bruce. I really do. He's the type of coach I would want to play for. But this is all bad. This is bad. Like, you don't do that. You just sit it, right? Like, Andy Reid would never do that. Coach Shanahan barely did it. He did it probably a handful of times in my 4 years with him. I mean, I rarely seen it. Bill Belichick didn't do that. Bill Belichick coached Tom Brady harder than anyone has ever coached Tom Brady. Think about that. Like, since he was a boy, Bill Belichick is a guy that stood in front of the team meeting when Tom was sitting at the front and said, you didn't play well. Yep. He's notorious for calling out Tom Brady. Tom doesn't... I'm sorry, guys, but this is just... I just don't understand what value this adds. Because when you look at a star player does two things when he's standing in front of the camera. Number one, when they lose, they take the responsibility. I got to play better. And when they win, hey, it was my teammate, right? So we're trained to stand in front of the camera and say the right things. And I just don't understand why Bruce would have this type of conversation with the media, adding more fuel to this fire. There's already so many other distractions. You got COVID-19. You just lost a big game in the season opener. It's just more distractions. I don't like it. I think Bruce is going about it the wrong way. If I'm Tom Brady, I'm looking at it and I'm like, look, my left tackle played bad. You gave me a right rookie tackle. Right? Like, this is Mike Evans stopped running down the middle of the seam. That pick is on him. But Tom Brady didn't say that in his presser. He just said, look, there's some things we have to clean up. So if I'm Bruce Arians, I think you really got to look yourself in the mirror and check this.
So, Brandon, I totally understand why, as a player, this could rankle you. As someone who's obviously never been a player, I look at it and I'm like, okay, this was one of the 3 most watched events, television shows, sporting event of 2020. And I say that to say this. The media knows Tom Brady played bad. It's not like Tom Brady had somebody, everyone's like, wow, Tom Brady played great. And then Bruce Arians like, let me debunk that theory. Everybody knew Brady stunk. So Arians was just confirming what everyone already knew. And part of Tom Brady's legend, and you guys both alluded to it, Brian and Brandon, is that he loves being coached hard. That part of the Patriot way was that Belichick could stand up in those meetings and excoriate Brady. So I don't think it's unreasonable for Bruce Arians, when they lose a game in large part because their most veteran,
publicly,
their highest
that's the
paid,
issue.
I got it, but they were very public, obvious mistakes, Brandon. It's like you've got your highest paid, highest profile, most important player who played terribly. To me, and Brandon, tell me if I'm wrong, if Bruce Arians goes out in the press conference I think Brady played well, he's not taken seriously.
So if this is the right way to do things, then why didn't Bill Belichick do it? He's never done it. Well, he's never done it. And obviously he has the perfect formula for winning. No, he doesn't.
Sure,
That's a card that you keep in your back pocket for week 15, week 16, and you need to really get somebody going. But to open up the season and call out the GOAT that way, I think it's a recipe for disaster. You just don't see coaches doing that. It adds no value at all. If I'm a player, I'm looking at it because then if that's the case, then you're telling Tom Brady he can do it. You're telling every other player in the locker room they can do it. Oh, it was that guy. Let's point the finger at every one of us. The blame game. It was my left tackle. It was my right tackle. It was Mike Evans. You don't do that. It's not good chemistry, and it breaks down your locker room.
What do you think, Wilds?
Brandon, he's a 43-year-old man. Like, he's got 6 Super Bowl rings. He's not a Fabergé egg. Like, you can toughen him up a little bit. Like, give me the only issue I have is Bruce Arians kind of like running off at the mouth and being like, yeah, I'm prematurely knocking on Brady. Because, Brandon, you had it right. Here's a quote I want to show you. Arians said after the game that the pick, the first one, Brandon, was the result of an overthrown pass against cover 2. But Monday, after watching the film, he clarified that Evans should have, quote, no doubt kept the route going, as it was against quarters coverage, which opened up the middle of the field. So I don't have an issue with him saying, like, hey, Tom Brady played bad. But now Bruce Arians is backtracking on criticism. I think that is more of a concern rather than giving Tom Brady some well-deserved lumps, Brandon.
Yeah, Brian. I don't know if you want to jump in here again. I just think it's bad. It's like on the airwaves this morning. That's all we're talking about. Instead of us talking about them losing and what they need to do to move forward, we're talking about all these headlines. It's a distraction. You're putting Mike Evans in a bad spot, Tom Brady in a bad spot. You're putting yourself in a bad spot when you really have a great opportunity to do something tremendous this year.
Well, here's the thing about Tom Brady. We know that he's a student of the game. We know that he's also a student of coaches. I have to believe that when he went down there with Bruce Arians, this isn't the first time that Bruce Arians has called out players. This is not the first time that he's called out even some of the mistakes that he has made. So I have to believe that Bruce Arians was, number one, 100% honest with Tom when he came down there. I'm going to coach you like everyone else because here's the most important thing. We don't have a bunch of time to be building things down here in Tampa. We got to win right now. You don't bring in Tom Brady to try to build a system and win in 4 or 5 years. You need to win right now. So we don't have time to kind of measure our words. We have to go out there and win right now. And Tom Brady accepted that. He has been coached hard by Bill Belichick. He hasn't been called out in the media in this way, but he has been coached hard before. So for Tom Brady, I think that he's always been his toughest critic, and this is just another thing for him to go out there and try to overcome.
I agree, Brian. I don't think there's no way, shape, or form was this a surprise to Tom Brady. I'm sure he knew that Bruce Arians was going to call him out on it. I'm sure they spoke before the season that he was going to be coached hard. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from First Things First, or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.